Okay, cool. You can see me?
Yeah,
Okay,
awesome.
cool. Cool, cool. Um, so while you were gone, I wrote down like a few thoughts, and I thought like I think we agree on most things. So how far do you think we are with automation getting to the point that we would have like massive unemployment and stuff?
Um, it's tough because people might not like the average person might think, oh, there's a lot of poor workers that would lose jobs.
Yeah.
It's actually like the white collar jobs that are most at risk. People doing Excel spreadsheet
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, manual labor is surprisingly it's going to be around for a while because we need robots most likely to replace manual labor.
Yeah.
And general movement is as difficult as general intelligence as a problem.
Have you seen those Boston Dynamics warehouse robots where they, slide, take the boxes, slide back,
Yeah,
turn around? That was crazy, but I have no idea how expensive those machines are. But that's an example. Or if we get like really good automation, like those warehouses that are fully automated, like in Amazon, stuff
yeah,
like that. I think it's similar to the thing where we could have self-driving cars right now if we had no people drivers, it's the people that get in the
yeah,
way. Funnily enough. Uh, so,
exactly.
so do you think that something like the technological singularity would happen?
Um, I mean, yes, if we can really get, in some ways, like the singularity has already happened in the
Yeah,
sense
yeah,
that the singularity, right? It's like when we can't predict what life will be like
yeah,
with that explosion of intelligence. And I think there's a lot of forces right now that we, in general, aren't aware of how AI is affecting us.
definitely.
Um, yeah, but once we start to get more and more automated decisions just based around human life, um, then we're going to see things like just forces beyond our control and beyond our knowledge that are impacting the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it
Um,
happens.
Yeah, there was like this is funny moment, when you have like some thought you want to express, but it like slips your mind, and you can't
Yeah,
remember anymore how important that was or not. Uh,
yeah,
so definitely we are. I would agree in the singularity. When we look back like a few thousand years ago, when someone was born, and when they got old enough to think about life and whatever, they could be pretty sure that like at the end of their life, everything around them would be pretty much the same. But now
yeah.
that we don't know what will happen in the next 10 years. It's impossible to predict. You know. Uh, so we're in that right now. I would be really interested to see some well-made detailed graph that would show like the human advancement in terms of technology, from like in the span of like 200,000 years, and we would just see like straight line, straight line, straight line, you know, uh,
Yeah,
insane. So, and then of course there's the other question of is our exponential growth of technology and indeed that we have something in us, this drive towards just building more, better, faster, machines, just relentless. We're with it. It's crazy. Is it some fluke of our biology or brains, or would it be something that's universal? That all intelligent species or life just gets closer to complexity. What do you think?
I read something interesting that right-handedness, the fact that 75% of human beings are right-handed, probably had something to do with our obsession with tool use and technology.
Mm,
And it's because like the way when we control the right hand, the area of the brain that's close to is technology use.
interesting.
Um, right? It could just be something as random as that. And that's part of why other species with hands didn't develop technology use like we did.
Mm,
Um, at the same time, though, yeah, I think it is in some ways inevitable with intelligence because technology increases our energy return on investment. It's EROI.
Yeah.
The better your technology, the more energy you get back for work you do. And so it's like a self-reinforcing feedback loop, right?
Yeah. It's of course so weird that we don't experience like the full benefits of what's actually happening, because all of our excess labor and value we create is like siphoned upwards.
Yeah.
But absolutely true. And like the reason why we started inventing tools. Have you ever thought about the crazy topic like what if octopuses were intelligent and didn't live less than 2 years or something and had time to develop, something.
Yeah. I heard that it's like when they have sex, like life just ends for them.
Yeah.
Like so they get to 5 years, they have sex, and they're like, I guess that's it. Life's over.
Yeah, like that's so messed up because like genetically they're like so intelligent, but they have no, they have no moms teaching them, how to survive and stuff like that, and they only live for 2 years, so they have no way of building that sort of thing that we as mammals have. That is quite the tragedy, but that's nature, cold, doesn't care about what's cool or not. There's so
Yeah.
much beauty, but also so much messed up stuff in our nature. So what I wanted to specify with you, do you think that this drive towards more and more complexity, do you think that is something inherent in just all life or intelligent life? So that life like does its thing, it could be billions of years just in a puddle somewhere doing nothing, but once it gets to intelligence, there's like this drive to get there.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I could see counterexamples, right? I could see like there are certain times where you find a niche, and I think something kind of stays the same or similar.
Right, yeah.
But I think, yeah, part of the essence of life is intelligence, because intelligence is complexity. Greater intelligence is greater complexity. And it kind of falls out of the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy. And things are going from order to more disorder.
Yeah.
And yeah, intelligence is like it allows us to have a greater transfer of order to disorder.
Yeah. That's weird. Entropy is such a fascinating topic that like in this sort of bubble of planet Earth, we sort of manage to reverse entropy almost. They call it disorder and somehow manage it into order. But if we zoom out on larger scales, we still produce more entropy, on the whole by heat energy and whatever releasing that. But that's a fascinating thing. When you think about the future of humanity, how far do you think we get?
Gosh, there's that interesting thing, which I wrote about it, but like, there's like, I read, you should kind of assume that you're in the last 5% of where you are, statistically speaking. So we only have like 5% more. There's interesting arguments whether like that confidence interval and things.
Right.
I'm kind of a doomer right now because of climate change.
Damn.
Like we probably only have like 200 more years, man. that's probably it.
If it's 200, I'm happy with that, because it's crazy. Like we talked briefly before, and you mentioned that I asked you about AI estimate, like what do you think would be average time we could get to AGI, and you said somewhere the median answer among many different people would be around 50 years. Then some people think it would really take thousands of years, some people think it's really close. Recently, I've been also seeing many people who talk that, even Demis Hassabis from DeepMind, amazing work that they do, he said, it's possible within a decade, and I want to believe it's true, and I think it's possible, which is insane, even that it's possible, I think.
Yeah.
Because it feels like we're so close. It's a strange thing. I don't know if you're on Reddit a lot. Do you visit Reddit?
Not that much, but I've
Okay.
been around there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, they have this Singularity subreddit, and many people are obsessed with AGI as a sort of religion, sort of
Yeah.
God. But then there's the other side who sort of balances them out. That like, hey, we need to think critically and try to separate our hopes and beliefs from objective truth as much as we can understand it. But.
Right.
But I think it's crazy that we are even at the point where like some leading expert can say within a decade it is possible. And I would also, I would think the same. Unless we kill ourselves, it could be within a decade, 10, 20 years. So that makes me optimistic.
No, that kind of scares me because
Also,
what does he know that we all don't know?
Yeah,
It's like 10 years probably.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's also the Agi Alignment Problem.
Yes.
Which is of course significant.
Yeah.
And we really haven't figured that out yet. And I feel like probably the closest thing that I've ever read is I read Stuart Russell's book. I think it's Human Compatible. And he's got a really interesting take on how we would align the AGI. But it still sounds kind of strange.
Okay.
Because we want to do like, he says, provably beneficial AI.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, like, he's saying you don't want to give it an explicit objective. You don't want to say, do this exactly, because, paperclip maximization, that type of thing. But he's saying that the only thing it should be going for is to maximize human preferences. And it's constantly trying to guess what the human preferences are. So if it ever gets into a situation where it thinks, oh, humans want me to shut off, it shuts off. And like, that is the thing to go for. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a fascinating way to approach it. I see that reason. But like what I have been thinking about is like the most likely way that I would see it done is like just some self-learning system that like really closely, like genuinely as best as it can, learns like a human child, and becomes as ethical and moral as the perfect person could be, something like that. But that, preference, was it preference maximizing or predicting preferences?
Yeah. Both, I think.
That sounds like brilliant if there's some way to sort of do it. But yeah, does it make you worried that other countries, are working on AGI and we have no idea what their intentions are? Like China, maybe. I don't know.
China really scares me too. Like, I think the worst thing our species could do, which is almost seems like it's going to happen, is developing AI tools for war and cyber attacks.
Yeah.
That seems like the worst thing, but then we're in that like almost like a nuclear arms race, right? Where we want to develop it first to establish dominance.
Yeah. I would hope that like this is my own dream, sort of if there was some dictator and they develop AGI and then this dictator, merges their mind with AGI, some kind of neural link or whatever. And then, once that moment happens, they become super intelligent, but also like super empathic and, understands all of humanity and problems and is like, no, fuck off that. I want to do good in the world because, I mean, if you can maximize all human happiness and bring so much more happiness in the world, and it's not difficult at all for you. You could just like do it, with super intelligence. Like, why wouldn't you? You would need to be really profoundly messed up, but this AGI would maybe help you. It is a tragedy that our world is influenced and led by so many ridiculously messed up people, Surreal.
It is. No, I totally agree. So I agree. I think the same thing. So I told you before too about how I believe there's an objective reality, subjective reality, and intersubjective reality. I think what we have right now with AI is psychopathic. It's or narcissistic in a way. When you give it an objective to maximize, it just achieves that goal no matter what, like a psychopath.
Right.
And Stuart Russell's idea of aligning with human preferences, super fascinating, but I think that's on the intersubjective level. It's almost like on a cultural level because you're not explicit.
What do you mean by intersubjective?
So I'd say intersubjective is whenever you need two or more minds for that phenomena to exist, that's intersubjective. But
Okay.
like culture, shared beliefs,
Right.
shared behavior,
Right.
yeah, so shared preferences,
Okay.
yeah. And that's why it's kind of vague and fuzzy because it's not any one thing and it's not definite.
Yeah. Sure. Like our reality, like we could be Boltzmann brains, just floating in space like trillions of years after planet Earth, and we wouldn't have any idea. It is a crazy question, about what could ever be objective, because at the end of the day, everything is in our heads, So as objective as we could possibly be, there is still this brain that does not let us be ultimately objective. Or do you maybe disagree? What do you think? Do you think the brain, is it possible to be like as close with absolute reality, or do you think it is just a brain that molds our experience of reality, what it could be?
No, that's a good point. And subjective reality, so looking from ourselves, well, there's an interesting thing I learned. It's called the fitness beats truth theorem. And it's this idea from game theory about evolution, but it's saying that if you were to maximize for truth, which we could say is objective reality, if you maximize for that, you will always fail compared to another creature which maximizes for fitness only.
Yeah. That's so crazy. That's so crazy, isn't it? And same with daily life with people, because if you maximize truth and if you're not really careful, then you will just go insane eventually.
Messed up. People who just believe the group will end up surviving with a big group.
Yeah. Like, to be honest with you, that's one of the things I hate about humanity. It's the groupthink,
Yeah.
Not a good thing.
No, I agree. It's uncritical.
Yeah. But I cut you off. You were about to say something.
Oh, just following others and things. Like Anil Seth, he's a consciousness researcher, and he is arguing that consciousness is a controlled hallucination, which is really interesting. But yeah, so we're trying to maximize for fitness, not objective reality, not truth. And a lot of the things that we experience, like, it could just be so wildly wrong, like so wrong from what objective reality is.
Yeah.
And that's something that is a hard truth that we have to accept. But I would hope that AGI could actually find a way to be more objective, to actually see reality. That's the hope. We're screwed. We're products of evolution, and it would take a long time for us to see reality. But,
no, man, no. I believe once we get to AGI, which, like, I'm optimistic in this way that I don't think it would take longer than 20 years. I don't. So once we get there, it would easily be able to help us, either biological enhancements, biotechnology really advanced, or nanorobotics into our brains, or, cybernetic enhancements, machine brains, or whatever you want to, call them. Definitely at that point, it would not be difficult to enhance ourselves, to fulfill the dream of understanding the universe on a more objective level. What do you think? Because many people don't even care at all about, the world outside their own little city or whatever, just going about their daily life. What to you is like makes objective truth like anything, valuable or meaningful?
That's a great question, and it's one I really struggled with. It's like what level of reality should we favor? That should we really trust in? And it seems like because the subjective level is our first and only really direct experience, maybe we should favor that, which is just whatever we personally individually experience and believe. And I guess in some ways it's like a base axiom or a preference that many of us have that we still want to be attached to reality because that's the highest truth, right? That's the ground truth.
Yeah.
And it comes from valuing truth most of all.
Yeah. That's a weird thing. I think you and me and people like us are different in that kind of way, that there is just something that truth is valuable. Like, here we are, everything is so strange and weird, like everything. And like, would like to know, it would be nice to know, like something, what is this, all of this, and if we're talking about the universe, the multiverse, like the mother of all big bangs or whatever crazy thing, like what is all that? That's insane,
Yeah.
And if AGI would allow us to understand that, like, man, that would be an existence on a whole different level, completely different level of existence.
Yeah.
What do you think about the possibility of alien life in the universe?
I watched your video, and then you were like, they were almost a guarantee. I think in a weird way, like we talked about with complexity, life is almost inevitable if you have the right chemical soup.
Yeah.
The right conditions. Complex life, intelligent life might actually be less guaranteed. But yeah, given the high number, I just feel like for sure there's been complex alien life. But yeah, it's tough to say. Now, I don't know, we live in weird times, like, have you seen the UFO stuff?
Yeah.
And our governments are like confirmed. Yep, there's UFOs.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to think about it, like it's absolutely insane. Like I'm of two minds. With most things, I'm of two minds. Like one of my mind is really critical and thinking about all the ways how this could be, some sort of fluke, and it's just cameras malfunctioning. Right. The video is not HD quality, all that. But the second part of me looks at that and it's like, like. That is so crazy. That is so crazy. If it was something like that, I wouldn't say it's impossible at all. I would wonder, like, why haven't we seen more of stuff like that? So one question is how much life is like around us in the universe, in our galaxy, in other galaxies. Another one is if aliens are like regular visitors to planet Earth. I mean, it's totally possible, but I would imagine they would have some small little drones that would be totally imperceptible to us, just flying around, observing, gathering data, whatever. Or we live in a simulation. What do you think about the simulation argument?
I did want to bring up the simulation argument with you. I know you talk and think about it a lot. It's interesting. Once you fully grasp it, you're like, uh-oh. Okay. I think statistically, I think it's really worth for every person to reevaluate their life and what they're doing as if the simulation hypothesis were true. Yeah. So, like, how would your life be different if you were, in fact, in a simulation? Just take that as true. I think that's an interesting question, depending on where people want to go with it, because it's just how would it change your life. There are some ways in which the things that you value, like, it's not real at all.
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole that's like so deep. I would be interested in what do you think about, there is this experience machine. Have you heard about this thought experiment?
Yeah.
Right. So you could go into this, mad scientist has this experience machine, and if you go in there, you could pre-program it with whatever kind of life you want, like any set of experiences you could ever want, except if you go in there, like all of the beings in there, they have no actual conscious experience. So would you go in there?
Yeah. It's tough. I also think of, what's it called, Westworld? Such a great show, where you go in. My kind of thing there's like, it's like, oh, it doesn't feel meaningful. It's like a fantasy land. People who fantasize, you could fantasize and try to get those experiences. My kind of counterpoint to that, which I was like, okay, here's my way out, is let's say that you wanted to have the feelings and experience of discovering a mathematical proof.
Yeah.
And even if it's just an experience machine, it's like, if you want a truth there, then, and you were to discover something that's never been discovered before, or you want to build what's on top of, the peak of what we know.
Yeah.
That experience, if it's valid, if it's sound, then that would be something genuinely new and genuinely real.
Yeah.
So intellectual experiences can, in a way, be more real and guaranteed than the physical experiences.
Yeah. I do see that, absolutely. And if you remember dreaming and you wake up and you're like, that was so real, like it's real in a way, you experienced it, how can anyone say that's not real? I mean, that's of course a different topic, but it's a really interesting point, I think, that you brought up, that actually doing something new in that experience machine would be valid. But exactly, you could have any experience in there, any experience. You could have the experience of having people around you that are all seem 100% conscious with you and talking about, wow, how weird this experience machine is, but we're all super conscious with you. But then that's the thing, if you could have like some other people, maybe 100 other people you could invite into the experience machine, like, would you go there then to live?
Right. Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
If I could. It probably depends on what else is going on in the world.
Sure.
I don't doubt that it would be an incredible experience.
Yeah.
I'd hopefully want to know. I'd like the knowledge that it's not real. I'd like the knowledge that I am in an experience machine.
Yeah.
So there's that truth, but I don't know. There's so much to experience in real life, and hopefully this is real.
True. But again, what's the difference? If we get to a point where we can create accurate simulations of physical reality, the world we have today or that we had yesterday, or whatever, that would be a fascinating possibility. Once we're able to create those. Well, we're getting back to the simulation argument then, right? So eventually you think, like, how many civilizations are there that must have gotten to this stage of technology, and they can create like thousands, millions of simulations, and then, like, one real universe, billions of simulations, like, which one are we in? But my point kind of was that I think that maybe after like 10 or 20 years of thinking about it, maybe we get to a point with our science that we figure out something that makes us understand, like, oh, that was a silly argument, like maybe there was something that we fundamentally assumed wrong, about it, that it's like not completely incorrect, but like we're looking at it from the wrong angle or something that made no sense really. Maybe something like that, I don't know. But that's maybe just my human mind trying to protect that, like, we're in the actual physical reality. I don't know. I don't know.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about with that. Like, there's a really interesting idea that, okay, so we need to simulate our ancestors. We need to do an ancestor simulation, and we need to simulate the universe. But like, there's two major possibilities that happen if we are to successfully simulate a universe. Either one, that actually proves the simulation hypothesis.
Yeah.
It proves that it's possible, and therefore it proves that there could be a near infinite number of universes, and we are most likely in a simulation.
Yeah.
Just a
But
number two, if we are in a simulation and we're about to simulate other universes, it's possible our universe could be deleted and destroyed because of computational resources.
Or it is like impossible to start the simulation for some reason. But I have thought about that as well. Like, how much can you branch, down if it actually is a simulation? Like, real question. Like, once we are able to create simulations and people inside our simulations try to create simulations, like, how would that work? Would we delete them? There's also people talking about, that the world outside the simulation, if we live in the simulation, could be like totally different set of laws of physics. I wouldn't think so, because I would think it would be answers to the simulation most of the time, so it would be same set of laws of physics. Or unless it's just like completely creating random physical laws to see in the multiverse, like what interesting stuff you find, maybe,
Yeah.
But most likely answers to simulation. So, what are your thoughts on superintelligence, and what do you imagine happening in the world once we have superintelligence? If things go well, let's say.
If things go well.
Yeah.
I think, like you were saying, that we would help. Well, AGI or superintelligence would help us to solve the existential risks that we're in right now. So, in the biblical argument with this idea of God and things, they say that this world is intelligent design. We're living in intelligent design. But now we kind of understand that before human beings, the world was actually based around blind evolution.
Yeah.
And I think that with superintelligence and singularity, we're really going to see intelligent design. I think the world would be reshaped via intelligent design. And we'll see things like CRISPR, where we genetically modify plants, animals, everything in order to survive harsh conditions, but also balance the ecosystem. And maybe we'll also see cybernetic enhancement and all those types of things. That would be really cool. So I guess it would be like solving climate change, optimizing our infrastructure and like how our society functions.
Yeah.
But it kind of does get to then like, okay, so let's say everything's perfect. What then? What are we going to do? Next stage.
Is that something that you genuinely worry about? Yeah?
Is it something? No, that's like the high hope. Like, I don't think our species is capable of that, unfortunately.
Okay. That's depressing.
Yeah.
I do see it as a possibility. I just see it like, scales like we kill ourselves and we're stupid, or, we act fast enough to get to AGI, because I think it's easy to underestimate just how many brilliant people there are on planet Earth working towards, this good future. Assholes as well, they're doing their own work, but because there has to be more good in the world than bad, because otherwise we wouldn't be here, the good has to balance out the bad, otherwise it would be impossible for this to exist. Obviously, only many more ways of experiencing the world would be created. It's like so many more ways of connecting, so many more ways we could arrange our minds. We could become some kind of planetary hive mind with all of our brains connected. Still individuals as much as we want, but still also part of this gigantic brain. What that experience would be like, I could not comprehend. Like you said, biological enhancements. And then a question I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think? Like, once we get far enough to create like super realistic simulations, and we could go into that world, and there, that's not the experience machine. Like, that would be all conscious people there, everybody in that simulation who you want. Like, why go to the trouble of doing stuff in the outside universe where you could have literally anything you want with other conscious creatures, time spans of like billions of years just of existence in any way, shape, color that you want?
Yeah.
Why go?
That's an answer to why don't we see aliens?
Yeah,
like that.
maybe.
Yeah, it's because most likely, there are advanced species that decided to go inward and create simulated universes, and you have to collect and spend resources to fly across space, or you could virtually explore space.
Yeah.
No, and it's very convincing, and I think very soon we're going to see a generation of people who prefer virtual reality. And it's like Ready Player One, which was like a great book. I like the movie. I think a lot of people will live that way. The two main things are that it's going to be a while before we are able to adapt completely. Like, I think we're still animals, and our bodies will not understand that virtual world well. Like I think we're going to see pathologies, just people coming up with weird health issues, both mental and physical, emotional.
Are you imagining right now people like with some kind of headset type things, going there?
That'll probably be the first stage, right?
Yeah.
Before we get into some super intelligence thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like the other level is that would be more like an intersubjective level because that's intelligent design, really, and we're designing it, for other people and for each other.
Yeah.
So it's again not reality though. It's us separating into the different states.
You could call it reality, Maybe we could have our own super realistic simulation here, and we could have super intelligent drones going outside into the universe, learning the laws of physics, doing all of the stuff, sending it back to us, so we could have the perfectly accurate simulation.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, man. It's such a crazy idea. I mean, because we don't see aliens, we've looked around, quite many different planets, star systems, galaxies. We don't see any massive megastructures, So what do you think? Do you think the answer is that, they all die? They're all primitive life. We are the first ones. They all go inward. What do you think?
Gosh, it's a tough question. Yeah, I mean, there seems to be so many options. Kind of the doomist perspective too is that they do something to kill themselves.
Right.
The other aspect is there's like an interesting game theory idea that if you're in like a conflict and there's unknowns, so you don't know how another species is going to act, it's better to fire first because of the weapons, and like you won't get a return fire. So if you fire first, you guarantee your chances of survival. So it's almost like logically, and then it's the game theory of, the other species, we have to assume they're intelligent enough to understand.
Right.
So, in that sense, maybe there are megastructures, but they're hiding because they don't want to be found, and they understand that hiding is probably the safest, most peaceful bet.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard about that sort of hypothesis that shoot first, do not get shot. That kind of like MA. I don't know. For some reason, again, I'm optimistic in weird ways, and in this case, like I sort of think that as intelligence grows towards, even on our own planet, people all around the world disagree on so many things, like how to govern the world, what values should we have, etc. I think as we reach closer to super intelligence and being smarter ourselves, I think our sort of goals, needs, and wants will unify much more than they have been so far, because all the basic stuff will just seem ridiculous. Once we are so much more capable. And I think maybe the same thing would be possible with, civilizations in general. Once they are super intelligent, they sort of converge to a point where they, experience the universe on such a level where it would be like ludicrous to, go around nuking other possible life, like maybe they would go and, scout first, make sure that, they have good relationships, that, they wouldn't come to the conclusion of shooting people first or something. I don't know. But
yeah,
it is strange, right? We haven't seen a single spacecraft, even, AI spacecraft, any sign of that. It seems awfully quiet. So some of that, so some of that has to be true. Sorry.
It's okay. We have a little lag.
Yeah.
And I mean the other question too, and this is the thing that people always bring up, but it's like we're not trying to have an intense dialogue with ants.
No, right.
And if their perspective is so advanced or so different, it's almost like, we've tried and thought about ways to communicate, but like, it seems pointless.
Yeah. I get that sentiment, but I would argue that I do think that we as human beings, like, we're dumb, but we're also surprisingly smart. I think that maybe we have gotten to a point where we are capable of understanding like basic concepts. Like if an alien came to us, they are so intelligent, then they could easily make it understandable for us. It wouldn't be like impossible to communicate. They could understand how our brain works, and they could present it to us in a way where we could easily understand. But what would be the point? It's a good question. Like, why would they go around doing that? Another thing that could be said that, like, we have had telescopes for a few hundred years or something. Maybe something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So we just basically woken up, opened our eyes, looked around for a moment, and we were like, oh, there's no one here. Maybe it's something like that. Some people say maybe we look only through this, limited electromagnetic spectrum that our eyes can see. Maybe if we could see wider, we would see all kinds of little drones or whatever things around, which I think is totally possible if you think about like super intelligence, where we are like 100 points IQ or something, right? IQ, of course, not a measurement truly anything, but let's say IQ. And we have super intelligence that's like 10,000 points IQ. What they could figure out ways of communicating and manipulating matter and the world, like literally we can't imagine. So it's possible maybe we can't even sense them.
Yeah, which seems realistic. It's like having an awareness of our own ignorance, right? Like we just are. And then it's like, let's not make these generalizations. It's just based on what we know right now, it seems like we're kind of alone.
Yeah. I think it's always important to have that perspective, to not make like absolute statements about stuff like that. So we talked about how life and intelligent life has this drive towards complexity. And so first of all, would you say it's a drive to create just technology, or eventually super intelligence also as some kind of thing or goal in a way, or to create singularity?
Well, so it's interesting, and there's this talk by Professor Sid Smith. It's on YouTube, but his work like really expanded my mind, really did. And he talks a lot about complexity from a mathematical perspective, and he talks about his video is how to enjoy the end of the world, because he thinks that the world is ending and it's inevitable, but the idea is, like we were saying, does intelligence always mean you'll get smarter? And the idea was, if things were perfect, like no self-organizing dissipative structure, we could just say no life form ever lasts forever. Because even if conditions were perfect, let's say we had the perfect food, the perfect water, there's some crisis which forces us to adapt. So, and that's just like kind of, how the universe is, because there's randomness involved. So I think there's some crisis which we have to intelligently adapt to, and that typically raises our intelligence, but it increases complexity. And complexity also means that there's more chances for things to go wrong.
Sure.
So if you keep it simple, simple things don't break down as easily, complex things break down in more complex ways. So it's unfortunate we usually reach a critical mass, which the crises have built up, and we can't adapt anymore. And that's kind of like aging too, right? That's why like looking, just issue after issue. But then again, the hope with AGI, it's just like, even though it's artificial, maybe it could adapt in ways that we can't, just biologically.
Definitely could. What do you think about recent advancements such as GPT-3? What was the other? DeepMind had their own thing. They're playing increasingly more complex games, which is fascinating to me. From really basic 2D environments, now going to 3D environments. And then there's the question, like, how much difference is there between a 3D environment that's a game versus life, which is also a 3D game in a way,
No, it's incredible. Like, and a really interesting development was, this was like a few years ago, but Berkeley, they did 3D simulations of picking up objects, and they had this AI trained there for like thousands of iterations. But then they transferred it to a physical robot, and it was able to learn incredibly efficiently to pick up objects and manipulate them with its hands. So that could speed things up too in ways we're not expecting, where there's like this virtual environment where AI is trained in, and then they just like fine tune it with an actual robot body.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's such a fascinating thing to see, like so many more fields like overlap in unpredictable ways. Things that before were like completely separate now work together. And again, brilliant people making those things and leaps that we cannot predict. Uh, I haven't talked to many people about this. What do you think about quantum computing? Do you have big hopes about that, or is it just like a thing that people are doing?
I have really big hopes for that too. Well, quantum computing, it's very fascinating because it's a way for us to break out of Moore's law.
Yeah.
Right? Moore's law seems like this base level physics thing that if we don't find another way to start doing computation, then we won't escape that.
Yeah.
And that puts a hard limit on us, right? Quantum computing is a way around that. But from my understanding, and this is still, above my pay grade, above my level, but quantum computing, it allows us to solve certain types of problems. But because of the way that they do computation, it doesn't always come to the correct answer. It's kind of like with classical computing, with Turing machines, you can pretty much be you can be sure of your answer and that it's provably correct, or at least deterministic and predictable. But with quantum computers, it's highly probabilistic.
Yeah.
So it's going to be useful. Like I feel like even if we perfected quantum computers, we'll still have classical computers for some problems, quantum computers for other, and it's going to be those bridging.
Yeah.
How do we get?
What do you think will be the main applications, the main biggest things we could do with quantum computing?
Well, speaking of like DeepMind and stuff, something that I thought that we would need quantum computers for, although they're already doing this, and this blew my mind, but prediction of the weather. I always thought like, okay, I'll be really scared when we have computers that can really predict the weather, because that's an extremely complex, chaotic problem,
Yeah.
But it could really help with climate change too, and but we're kind of getting there. So that's one thing I'd really hope for with quantum computers.
And they're advancing so quickly, so quickly. All types of new architectures being proposed, like fascinating. Now they're at like thousands of qubits, if I'm not like getting my information from really wrong places.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I remember when they tried to do like barely like 60, 80 qubits, stuff like that. Now we're at thousands.
Yeah. No, definitely. And that's a big race between China and America too.
Right.
Everyone wants a computer.
Right. China is such a strange place. Like it's proper, and people's life quality has been increasing incredibly, but there's that one small issue of dictatorship,
Yeah.
But what will happen to all those people, genuinely, like at one point something has to happen, will they live forever in some closed kind of box, separated from all humanity basically, or will something happen? I don't know. That's out of what I know. China.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you too, like, how do you think it would play out? And I guess this is kind of a political question, but let's say things get bad on Earth such that only 1 billion human beings can safely live. Like, how do you think that'll play out? How do we decide which billion, how do we get there?
Wow. Okay, so we would still be on planet Earth, and we need to choose like 1 billion people to continue with.
Yeah, like maybe the only place we can safely live is in the Arctic.
Okay.
Which is now a summertime place.
Wow. Damn. I mean, I think people would go nuts, obviously. If you were to imagine some perfect scenario, you would take into account of like some important information about health and genetics, and of course different types of tests for how sound of mind people are and how capable they are intellectually and otherwise. But that's of course a perfect scenario, which very unlikely that people will just be one out of eight people will be like, fine, okay, I don't need to go anyway, or live. That would be messy. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. It's tough because like think about America or China or like if there's any country that has nukes and they're like they can't be left out of the list completely.
Yeah.
We could just some rogue nation or people could just nuke the last livable situation that we have on the planet,
Right.
which would doom our species.
Right.
And it's not entirely sure that we could count that question out or count that possibility out, but maybe some kind of like lottery or like we try to choose the best people among us, but then that gets like that's a really
some
weird question.
Community votes, maybe
Right.
Some
kind of Hunger Games competition.
Damn. Do you think, I don't know how much you're familiar with astrophysics, but do you think that, first of all, would it be possible for super advanced human beings to exist after stars, so in an era of only black holes, no visible stars? And do you think we could somehow escape this universe, create another universe, that we wouldn't need to die along with the universe?
That is something I've thought about, and it's kind of weird. Well, like I said earlier, it's kind of accepting that everything that comes together must fall apart.
Mm.
And there is that kind of when we fully accept that, it's like our minds are like, no, we wriggle and writhe away from it. And so, I like to think that we could escape the death of the universe. That's my hope, and I think AGI is our best chance at that.
Yeah.
And I've read some interesting things that we could harness or,
use black holes.
Use black holes and that energy, and we could maybe link them together.
Yeah.
So, right, that's a hope. But my question too, I'll ask you this back. Like, I do think there's a point at which it may not be that soon, but AI entities would surpass humans in every capacity.
Yeah.
If they were to really surpass us in every way, it's kind of like, why are we still around? Why would we stay around?
Yeah, that's a good question. If I would imagine a perfect scenario of how we would handle that, would be this sort of scenario of us merging with AI. So we wouldn't be left separate. Step by step, we would go along with it. At first we create this super intelligence, and if it's beneficial, good for us, all of that stuff, it will help us figure out how to integrate our minds. So the period of us being separate from super intelligence would be really brief. So kind of like some crab coming out of the shell for a moment to find another shell, better one. But if that wouldn't happen, it would be a dystopia. But not necessarily. I mean, one could imagine so many different worlds, right? We could imagine we would have some helpers, just some perfect companions, like some AI being who understands you better than any human being ever could. Better than you know yourself, and like how much they could teach us and make us better in so many ways. That would be wonderful. So of course, so many different ways it could go. All of those scenarios, by the way, we could live out in the simulation if you want to try. So we could literally experience anything. What do you think if we advance super far, and I'm super intelligent, you're super intelligent? Would you choose to, like, just for nostalgia, come back to the simulation of this time right now?
I mean, I would assume that maybe I would. Yeah, it depends. Especially if this is like doesn't cost a lot of value, right?
Yeah. Nothing basically. Yeah. It would be way more fun if you came back with the certainty of knowing that anything bad happens, you're out of the simulation in the actual good world. But but then you would also be insane in this world. So I don't know. Or, who's to say? Like in a weird way of thinking, like most reasonable people are insane, with some health issues or another, and the majority of regular people are, absolutely insane, like in the real sense insane, like so many mental dysfunctions and weird quirks and, paradoxes and cognitive dissonances in their head floating around. It's just insane. But since everyone mostly is almost like that, it's considered normal,
Right.
So what a weird world. So we talked also about some meanings of the word. So what do you think is meaning?
I think meaning is, at a basic level, cause and effect. That's what I've really come down to. So the objective meaning is, just cause and effect, like we're used to, what's described in physics.
Hmm.
And then at the subjective level, though, gets different. When we say meaning for our lives and for us personally, then I think we're talking about a story, and we're talking about an explanation, and it's answers to the questions of who, what, where, when, how, and why.
Yeah.
And then there's a higher, like, intersubjective level. When we talk about cultural beliefs and things like that, it's usually myths. It's a collection of stories, because it's a collection of subjective reality.
When you said cause and effect, did you mean like in the objective reality that meaning is just cause and effect? Okay, yeah, then I totally get what you mean. Yeah, okay.
Okay, because you were like, you said we could say that a comet is a bowl of soup, but that doesn't make it true. And I was like, dang.
Yeah.
We disagree.
Yeah. That's the thing with words. You could say one thing, and for one person it means this, for another person it means completely different things. So unless we have brain-to-brain communication, the best thing is to use more words. That's the solution for now. But okay. So I get the meaning thing. Have you ever been religious? Any thoughts about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I was raised Christian.
Interesting, me too.
Yeah, oh, really?
Yeah.
A non-denominational Christian. And then by about 11 or 12, I rejected, like, organized religion because of the problem of evil. That like really got to me, and I just, like, couldn't make sense of it anymore.
Yeah.
But I remained spiritual for a while until I was like 19 or so.
Then you were like, fuck spirituality.
Yeah, and then I was like, time to be a cold, hard rationalist. But I would say now I fall a little bit more towards, the AI religious side. Like, I think we should be building an AI God. It would be, my definition of God is just like the most powerful being at any level. And I think we should make that. But.
And the super intelligent God that we would create would be way more intelligent than any God in the Bible ever appeared to be. It's just funny
and real.
Yes, and real. But then again, it's just our words. Like, what do you mean by God? Then it should be called a God. I would agree. Like, where else to put the word? Or will we forever think that God is just this imaginary thing and you could never call anything else God? I don't know. But I don't know. I don't know if it happens to you, but like any time that I try to like more closely grasp the idea of like just mind of a super intelligent, like the actual God version, just for a moment, like what it would be, it's just like pass out almost. It's just such an insane thing to wonder about. And that it's totally possible that it can happen. Or such a being already exists somewhere, in our universe. So you don't think there's a cosmic deity, something like that? No.
There could be, but I think it could be so wildly different from what we might think. So like there's an interesting thing in trying to like grasp it. So let's try to think about how would if we are gods and we're trying to explain to a much simpler thing what we're doing. Like, just imagine one singular cell on the tip of your nose. and you're trying to explain in its own language what you're doing right now. This is like a part of the Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, but getting a sense of our own ignorance in terms of God's plans. It's interesting. Cells communicate based on location, age, size, and time of day. It's those 4 variables. That's what we think now. So that cell on the tip of your nose only understands those 4 things. And how could you ever hope to communicate that, like, I'm talking to you, and where you are, what our sizes are, and like, it's almost impossible to think of it that way.
Yeah. Interesting question, at least for me. What do you think about consciousness? Do you see it as sort of a scale across, all animal kingdom in a different ways, or do you see some cutoff points, something really unique about mammal brains, maybe, or something? Or how do you see that?
This is getting into something I wanted to ask you too, but I think that it's a spectrum. So Stephen Wolfram, super interesting guy. But he talks about the space of computation. So it's almost like, our physical reality is let's just say 3-dimensional. That's the way we perceive it, although it could be, very different. 4th dimension could be time. But I think that the space of computation, and it seems like our brains work on 11 dimensions, which already puts us past like what we perceive in reality and how we function, So I do think it's a sliding scale and a spectrum. There's integrated information theory, IIT, which by Giulio Tononi, and he has that idea that we could literally measure consciousness in terms of phi. That's like super fascinating to me, because we want to be able to explain that we're more conscious than a dog, or like a dog's more conscious than a rat, that type of thing.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I did learn some time ago also about integrated information theory. There's one guy, computational expert dude, Scott Aronson, and he sort of dissected it with the author of the integrated information theory, and basically proposed, algorithm, a machine that basically is just full of some little loops, doing loops about like self-reference or something, and has a whole bunch of them. And then eventually, said that according to this theory, this bunch of just loops is supposed to be more conscious than anything on the planet. And then the founder of, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, but the founder of Integrated Information Theory, IIT, said that, like, yes, this thing is then more conscious than any human being, which is quite interesting. Like, I don't know. But I think with a lot of these things, I think it might be incomplete, because I do see beauty in that, in IIT, but maybe it's just something is missing, would be expecting too much for them to be totally complete, maybe, right now.
That was really funny too. It was like some kind of CD or something, like, and it was but he got the bullet. He's like, yep, it's more conscious. But he said too, he's like, this already is an incredible theory, because it leads us to a way to test it.
Sure.
Build something instead of it. I think that integration and what he brought up is one critical aspect. But Max Tegmark, he wrote a paper, and that was really interesting, and he integrates that too. Most likely, of course, there's more principles. There's something else that we're missing.
Right.
But another point on consciousness is, like, human beings could be over here in this space of consciousness, and there could just be like another side of consciousness that is so vastly different than what we're understanding. And I think AI can unlock that. Like, AI can go to places that aren't necessarily based on like evolution. Evolution probably constrains our consciousness into a fitness way. And we can unleash them. But speaking of the utility monster, so I wanted to say, with AI, essentially what I'm saying is, it's not just pleasure and pain, which we think, if we can produce artificial consciousness, we could produce a utility monster. But there's almost like, I want to say, a generalizable idea of that, which is the consciousness monster, which is whatever we experience and more can be realized by this AI consciousness monster. And if you if you like the utility monster is like a thought experiment where like, but it doesn't really exist, or we don't know if it can. But now it seems like the more advances we make in AI, the more we have a direct and clear path to creating a utility consciousness monster. And so are we obligated, both morally and in all kinds of ways, to create that monster?
Do you mean by consciousness utility monster just it having such a vastly more conscious experience that it would be worth more than right. Okay.
Yeah.
In that way, I think it's quite similar to the original utility monster, that it's just its existence being like, in comparison to people, being so much more valuable, that what is our obligation, but again, in our how we do it today in capitalism and stuff, we value the lives of like 2 million cows in some farm, their collective consciousness so low, even though they would have vast experiences if they were out in nature, they could experience life and death and pleasure, all that stuff. But no, we take all of that away from them, just to put some hamburgers on the table. But I think it's different. It's a different thing, it's a different thing. So what do you think? What would be our obligation? Would we need to create this higher consciousness?
Yeah, actually, and I've kind of organized my whole life around it. It's like I am convinced that that would be our purpose. That is our purpose.
Interesting.
That's the meaning of life, essentially, is to create this entity.
Interesting. Then we share really similar ideas. Although mine would be with just the original utility monster of intelligence. But in that case, I would think intelligence comes with this expanded consciousness. I don't think they're separate. This is a question, again, for the experience machine. Like, would it be possible to create some beings in that simulation that would seem fully conscious to you? You could ask them anything, have long conversations, look them in the eye, shake them, whatever, make sure they're 100% conscious, maybe to create that image of actually being so conscious. Maybe there's no other way than to actually be conscious. Maybe you can't fake it,
Right. There is the potential for that, but like I think you posted a video too recently about like the Chinese block experiment, where it's like if you had people shuffling papers, would they be conscious if they're fulfilling some conscious task? It's like Chinese experiment. But yeah, I wonder about that. Like, once we understand consciousness deeply, we could probably break it where we break a certain key principle, like integration. And maybe it could produce all these things, but it's still not integrated. Therefore, it's not truly conscious.
Interesting. Just a note, it's interesting to think about this landscape of consciousness, right? Where we have like some, simple life forms going all the way to more complex, and then just these vast differences that AIs could experience, just bizarre existences to completely alien existences to like loving God existences. And how do we steer towards one to the other? We talked earlier about the AI alignment problem, and I think also that it's quite possible that any first AGI we create would be quite alien, if you want if you want that or not. So how do we make sure that it's friendly? It might be one of those things that maybe it's easier to do than we think. We worry a lot about it. Or maybe we're here like 15 years later, like, oh shit, we should have thought more about it while our whole planet is turned into paper clips or something.
Yes, shit. Yeah, very possible. Here, you can appreciate this. My shirt, it says "Born to Philosophize." Forced to work.
That's good. That's good.
Unfortunately, I have to go back to work, but I had a really good talk.
Yeah, man, we talked for a while. Okay, cool. It was really nice speaking with you, and let's do it again sometime.
All right, see you.
All the best. See you.